This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Southampton Select Board for March 23rd, 2023 at 6 p.m. We could all stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Okay. We have basically a budget meeting this evening. We've heard that a couple of the finance people are not going to be able to make it. Hopefully one of them will be able to, but if not, we will proceed as is. So at this point, do we have any open time for the public? Yes, Robert. Thank you.
Good evening. Robert Floyd, College Highway Town Moderator. Let's talk about the annual town meeting. It's 5 weeks away this Tuesday.
Yep.
And it has to be posted on the Tuesday before that, the week before that, on April 25th. I imagine you would be signing the warrant on the 18th, or you could sign it on Thursday the 20th. But if you sign it on the 18th, then the town moderator's annual town meeting article information session will be on the 20th, Thursday at 7 p.m.
Okay. We will keep those dates in mind and work toward those.
Teamwork. Cheers. Thank you.
All right. Good, thanks. Anybody else? Open time? Okay. If not, we don't have any public hearings or presentations tonight, appointments or resignations or reports. So let's just jump right into the reasons that we're here. We have two budget discussions tonight, one for the Fire EMS Department and then also for both Norris and Hampshire Regional. And so that's basically our agenda for this evening. So we'll try to keep not a lengthy meeting, I promise, although John says he doesn't want to get out of here before 11 o'clock or something, but I'm not quite sure why. Anyway, so let's start off with I guess estimated revenues. Is that was the first thing on the agenda, Ed? Is there any update on revenues that we have here?
We've made a couple of little changes to the revenues, and only changed it by memory. $15,000. So if Bradley, if you throw that up there. So right now, from, shall we say, the tab 1 budget request to what we show in revenues, and this does not account for any COLAs for non-union or non-contractual individuals of approximately a $177,000 deficit. But that also, I'll remind the select board, is we haven't gotten to April 1st which is the required date that students have to put in for vocational placement in high schools such as Smith. Right now, the figure that's in there I think is probably about $150,000 to $200,000 low compared to what we've seen for new applications in past years, but we will not know that for sure until after April 1st.
What do you have in there right now? Just scroll down, yeah, sorry. Can you find it?
My memory is it's $19,599,592.
Estimated revenue, okay. Okay. All right, so let's take a look first at the fire department, EMS, and wherever we want to go. I know you've got figures in here. We have a spreadsheet that shows actual expenses from 2022, and then the budget that we had approved for 23, and then an amended budget, and then the request budgets, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're looking at. Okay.
Could I just have a moment just to address
Sure.
in general?
Yeah.
Okay. For the fire department, we're a pretty unique animal in that we have both expenses and we have revenue. So some of the challenges that we're facing this year is just our expense accounts, our wage accounts are going to be over budget. It was something that I had warned was going to happen last year in finance meetings, and it's come to fruition this year. So there's bad news, there's good news, and then there's great news. The bad news is that when I project out using as best as I can possibly accommodate any projected costs, in total, between wages and expenses, we're probably about $60,000 that we could potentially be over our allotted budget from last fiscal year. That number includes $10,000 that was not budgeted for fuel from DPW that would never been billed with before. That number includes $6,000 for an IV pump, which is something that the state is looking for us to get so we can do certain therapies with certain medications that we have. So there's about $16,000 of that, which is was never accounted for anywhere. The good news is that to this point, and one of the things you don't really see represented on the charts here, is that we have a revenue account. I'd gotten off the phone with Coastal Billing just prior to coming up here today, just to get factual numbers, and I did a couple of things. I asked them, because we pay them $8,000 to do all our billing, in case folks at home don't know that. I asked them to give me a total revenue from FY22 from July to this date today. And then I also asked them for the same total from this past July 22 in the FY23 budget to the date today. Just accounting for those 238 days, we are $51,000 more in revenue.
And how much total is that?
So it's the numbers, hang on, I actually have them written down. It's 155, 485, 81.
Chief, do you attribute that to increasing calls?
Wait, I'm sorry, let me just, and I'm sorry, just because I misquoted a little bit, let me clarify that first. So the FY22 from July to this date was 155, 485, 81. The current FY23 from July to this date is 207, 380, 72 cents. So we're $51,894.91 additional revenue this year than we were last fiscal year. And I'm sorry, what's your question?
Increasing calls, is that increasing billing of our own calls versus mutual aid?
Great question. So I'd happily, so absolutely, where does that come from? Why is that? Why are we getting more? Back in January of 22, I'd come to the board and tried to get a fair wage for individuals because I was having trouble getting enough people to sign up for enough shifts to really cover the calls that we had. As I've expressed to you before, I mean, the town has never really covered that third shift. So there was always, we had the initial one shift, we had an override for a second shift. At that point, there was 3 shifts. So there's always been a gap. But because we didn't have good coverage, people weren't covering every shift. When they don't cover, we don't spend money.
Right.
So part of the problem was wages. So when I came in January of 22, you folks agreed that a fair wage was in order. At that point forward, we started to get much better coverage. So that additional coverage means that we have people at the station responding from Southampton at the ideally ALS level more often than we did before because of that wage increase.
There were 2 wage increases, the minimum wage plus the special town meeting.
Yep, sorry. So with those wage increases, I knew that even though last year there was a cost of living increase to the budget, which you see on the wall, it didn't include the additional time that was being covered by people now picking up shifts. So last year I said, boy, with this budget that's only had the cost of living added to it, we're going to be short next year. And that's why I find myself now projecting out that I'm going to be short $30,000 in the EMS wage account. When I total up all of the overages that we have, like I say, it's that $60,000. And that's the shortage that we have this year. But our revenue is up by $50,000, and we still have 127 days left in this year. So the great news is that I'm actually, using the same numbers, projecting out to the end of this year, we're looking at an additional $110,000 in revenue, which gives us a total revenue increase of almost $150,000. So for the extra money spent from the fair wages went through, as you described, we're now covering more calls, gaining more revenue, and doing the job that we're set up to do, which is to provide advanced level life support to the citizens of this town, quality in a short period of time. So the great news is that we're doing our job better than we've ever done before. Our revenues are up. It balances against costs. And unfortunately, when we look at the sheets that you're about to see, as I look for more money and I sent you all the deficit sheets of where I am at exactly for every line item I have, so you can see exactly where everything gets spent. I wanted you to see, so you don't get blindsided, that there are shortfalls this year. But I think it's equally important that you see that there's revenue gains by the tune of about $150,000. So
do you know if it is that we're billing more of the calls? Do you know if it's because
we're doing more calls because we have
Medicare
more,
rate went up? On
Medicare rate hasn't gone up. I have one of my EMS coordinators who was tasked because Medicare is doing an audit of our system, so that we want to attribute all costs so they can then see if what they're paying us is adequate. I believe once this is complete, and I don't have any full-time people to help, I mean, I got a part-time person help me to do this. I think it's going to show that they are not paying us. I actually expect we're going to have additional revenue from Medicare because of their small numbers that they give you as the norm, compared to what we expend to get those calls covered. So Medicare hasn't gone up. The only difference is we have more people covering more shifts, taking more calls. Covering more calls. And our call volume is up. I mean, when I came here, our call volume was 400 calls per year. Our call volume is almost going to be close to 900 this year. And proportionally, our EMS calls, which were about the 300s, were 700 last year and will probably be 750 to 800 this year.
And so all of this increase in revenue, that balances out with the increase in charge that we're getting from Easthampton to cover for us when we can't?
Well, Easthampton charges is a whole nother matter, because the challenge then becomes, if you don't want Easthampton to come in, then that's where this whole budget that I want to put forward comes into play. Because if the state came in and said, okay, you know, you're doing great coverage for during the day, but at night, 50% of the time, you don't have a paramedic on. Right. You have basics on, so we're getting an ambulance to your home, but we don't have a paramedic. Right. And if you look at the industry in a whole doesn't have paramedics available. I mean, they're hiring basics at Easthampton. I mean, there's just a shortage in the industry. We're blessed in that it's a part-time job. So we do get a fair amount of people. I mean, we increased that roster. You've seen the PCFs come through. You know, we have 50 people that are on, and not if they all were full-time people, that'd be a lot. But they're all part-time, doing a part-time job, picking up a day here, a day there, take a month off, got a personal thing going on with a family or having a child, and you know, and so we're covering the schedule, but it's certainly a challenge. And as I proposed last year, and will propose again this year and reflected in my budget, is we really need some more consistency in the fire department, in the EMS, so that I'm proposing 2 full-time people. So if we have 2 full-time people, we'll meet the state requirement of having paramedics through that nighttime. We're missing about 100 calls already this year anyway. Well, my guess is about 100 calls. Those 100 calls are because at night is where we're, you know, is the ones where we're having to get a paramedic level ambulance service from another community in Easthampton. Every time we get it from Easthampton, it's $500. If we can get it from Westfield, which I'll only do because I don't care about the money, I want to do it for patient care, whoever's closer. So if Westfield is closer, it's only $300. I'm going to call whoever I think is going to give the best patient care. I would have to push the numbers. Bradley could probably tell us better what those numbers are and how much we've pushed out to Easthampton. But for me, when I look at it, revenue, what are my costs? I look at the business as a whole, as a business proposition, not just me justifying one side of the budget, my expense side of the budget. In the business model, if you want to cover more calls, do what we did last year, which is do something that gets more people working. If we have more people that can cover some of those night shifts, balance out some of the days, if we get an administrative assistant that can help with paperwork, so I'm not spending my time doing report after report when I really should be writing grants for tankers and things that we need here in town. That person, as an administrative assistant, could also be an EMT basic, and then a second ambulance, because we have that problem, and Murphy's Law, I guess, when our ambulance goes out, it's amazing how many times we'll get a second call. We could sit there for 3 hours, 4 hours with nothing, get a call, and then get a second call right after. And that second call, because our ambulance is out on the first, can't take the second call. If we get an administrative assistant, it unburdens the chief so that they can have more time doing the duties that they really should be doing, which is really some grant writing, focusing on public education, code enforcement, and the things that really need to happen better in this town than they're happening now. And the chief, if the only calls that chief had to make were to go on a second ambulance, I mean, at maximum, it's going to be 100 calls a year. Would you cover every call? Because I know John last year had said, you said you were going to cover every call when you got this raise. No chief in any town can tell you that they're going to cover every call. We go to Westfield because Westfield has problems with ambulance coverage. We go to Easthampton because they have problems with ambulance coverage. It's just endemic to the industry that you're going to have challenges to your workforce. And it's impossible to hire enough workforce to absolutely account for any kind of call volume that you would have in any given moment.
Okay, good.
Yes.
What is the average revenue you get from an ambulance call? Per call?
Yeah, I'd only be shooting from the hip, and I'd want to give you better numbers because it's important. It depends on whether it's a basic level call, which shooting from the hip is about $900. Maybe less than that, maybe $800. When you get into a paramedic level call, because once it depends on the therapies that a patient needs, and there's different levels of therapy, so they call it an ALS1 call or an ALS2. On an ALS1 call, it's about $1,300. On an ALS2 call, it's about $1,600.
Okay. So in either instance, if the backup were you had to do mutual aid with either Westfield or Easthampton, you would, out of that money, you would pay either $500 or $300.
If we don't have,
it comes to us.
If Easthampton or another community covers a call, they bill for the call, and we do not.
Oh, so we don't get anything,
We get nothing.
and we also have to pay them.
The only time that's different is if we send a basic crew
Okay. And they
and they just give us a medic. We still pay like Easthampton $500 or Westfield $300,
Okay.
but we get to bill the call.
Okay.
And so that's why I focus. Like, our schedule looks great. After a fair wage came in for medics and basics, shifts are covered. They may be basics that are covering them, but we get to bill for the calls that they're doing. There are little gaps here and there, and as people work more, it costs more, and that's why wage numbers, that's why I gave you the sheet on wage numbers and expense numbers. Expenses are up. I mean, last year we spent the total for one of our medical suppliers at $14,000. This year, 238 days into the cycle, and we're already $17,000. Just because you do more calls, you use more medical equipment. So as we look at the budget as proposed, I mean, that's where I really tried to not just look at a cost of living increase to the department, but I tried to forecast out to what does the department need in order to maximize revenue and do better and treat it more like a business. rather than just the spreadsheet of what did you spend.
Okay, good. We'll take a break and just say, welcome, Becky. Thanks for coming. Becky from our Finance Committee. So, good. So how would you like to go through the,
Any way you'd like. How, I mean, I can go, this, what I have here is just, looking to increase and then a justification. So as you look for a fire chief, and honestly, if I may go slightly tangent, I know that there's a challenge for getting fire chief position filled. The concern here is, I have some people are asking me, what are they doing? It's their part-time job. They're nervous about what's going to happen here with the fire chief because it could go a number of different directions. And some of the talk that's been out there of bringing in intern people, that's just an unknown to them. So there's a challenge there that ideally would have been addressed 9 months ago when I sent my resignation in, that it would have been addressed to have a follow-up if you needed to do an overview of the fire department as they did in 2015, that would have been done 9 months ago, and we'd be getting a chief in here.
So just on that question, though, I thought we got official notice in December. I thought it was our December meeting.
9 months.
You may have sent it in, but I don't think it showed up on the agenda. We were told until December.
Really? Okay, just, check the date on
In
it.
fairness, yes. we may be behind the
Absolutely.
eight ball, but
And I'm
it's
sorry
three weeks.
if you didn't get it to December, I don't mean to.
yeah, but it was still, it's 3 months in.
Yeah, because I did try and give as much notice as possible, because I do think that the only way to be fair, and I put my heart and soul into this department. I believe, I've been doing this for 33 years. I believe in the job. I enjoy helping people. I enjoy small community. And I want to see this and this fire department and EMS service be successful into the future. That's important to me. And so, I'm sorry if I misquoted that.
But, I mean, because people at home aren't,
They don't know, and it's an important.
So I guess my question back on the
Sure.
budget here is what you have proposed under wish list is what we have on our screen as budget 2,
Correct,
right?
okay.
Okay, and then those numbers going down there. Now, I know you're going to go line by line, but is that what you think we need to meet where you think the department should be with the 2 people you mentioned earlier, the 2 full-timers?
So my best estimate is this in front of you.
Okay. So if that's the case, can we just skip right down to EMT wages?
Yeah, just move on down. So
Because my question here on EMT wages is
Okay.
$494.
All right, and the only thing with,
Go ahead.
okay, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, John.
Some of the challenge I had with EMT wages was the problem that I had last year's budget cycle, was there was a cost of living increase, but there was not an increase that included the additional shifts that were being covered.
Right.
So that's a very hard thing to account for.
So my concern here is if I'm listening to you where we need 2 people, and I would not necessarily 2 paramedics around the clock, a paramedic and an EMT, I would say around the clock. Because if you had 2 paramedics, it's only going to cost more money. But if we went a paramedic and EMT based on the current wage scale that's in place, and we did the middle of the scale, which is 8 to 10 years, without adjusting for the COLA, so, if that's 2% or 3%, we'd have to do accordingly.
Yep.
Right now, the 8 to 10-year paramedic is $25.75 an hour, and the EMT is $19.18 per hour.
Okay,
2 bodies around the clock, 336 hours a week times 52 weeks, comes out to payroll wages need to be $785,000. And we got 494 here.
I'd have to look at your numbers. It's hard for me to do that in my head.
I mean, does this equal 2 extra people? Is that what that
So
equals?
what I did is, so for me, I look at it a little bit more globally. I didn't take that number, times it out. I look at the fact that I'm already paying at least a basic to be there currently.
Right.
I take that wage of that basic, if you take that out of our current budget and then add it to the $100,000 that I'm looking to put in, that's where you get an amount that'll hire 2 paramedics. Now, if I may, just for a moment, in Belchertown, I worked for 25 years, second in command. I had written a grant for $1 million that moved the ambulance service into the fire department. With that, sorry, I'm losing my I got too many things going through my head. Oh, I'm sorry. the challenge that we had was the town came to us and said, okay, we're going to hire these firefighters and we're going to try and pay them the minimal amount of the average firefighter pay. So when I look at Amherst, or if I look at Easthampton, some of these people who are hiring, what are they hiring their firefighters? Because there's a lot of things that you don't see in a firefighter contract that you don't see in a straight wage, with uniform allowance, longevity, accounting for like police department, where you get money for schooling, you get money for being a basic, you get money for being, so their base salary may be $50,000, but their take home is going to be closer to $75,000, $85,000. Most of the medics that work any kind of overtime earn more money than I do. So if the mistake that Belchertown made is they tried to go and hire the cheapest person that they could. When they hired that inexpensive person, that person then took all the resources that the town had with their $1 million grant that they had gotten, they put them through the academy, they trained them to whatever level they were going to train them to, and then that person, earning the least wage that Belchertown could afford, then left for another community that paid reasonable wages. So the challenge is to, if you want to retain people, the challenge is to look at the other departments, figure out kind of what their baseline wage is, and it's not easy because you have to go through the contract and kind of figure out what that number is and what it looks like. And then when we advertise, ideally we would have a competitive number.
Mm-hmm. So what you've done here, though, essentially is keep your essential staff as is, except adding 2 paramedics.
Yep.
In this line.
So when those 2 paramedics come on, ideally they're going to displace, because my schedule is close to full, and I say mine, when the department schedule is close to full, that means there's either a paramedic working or a basic working that we're already paying a salary. Mm-hmm. So even though I only add $100,000 on, there's going to be a savings for the person that they're going to displace. Because now if it's 2 paramedics you hire and you displace 2 basics, and some of my basics are, $24 an hour, $25 an hour, and that's, considering you can almost work at McDonald's for the same thing, I'm blessed to have them. So that's not a lot of money in the scheme of things, but when you add it in to the extra money that I'm looking to put on, I think there's flexibility in that budget that you can hire people at a reasonable cost. And yeah, you would need to really need to go out and see what that number is in comparison to the going rate for other communities. Mm-hmm. And as much as I'm shooting from the hip, it's from 33 years of experience.
Well, I still argue your budget is understated by $290,000.
And is it worth it if you want to do more homework in regard to that?
I don't. I just want a real budget in front of us, because you have said repeatedly that you need 2 people full-time, 2 bodies at all times in the station, and that's over 17,000. That's 17,472 man-hours. And if you divide that 494 by 17,470, this isn't strange math. You come out to $28.28 to be paid to 2 people. So you got to divide that in half. So you're only paying $14 an hour.
I guess how I figured it was, if I pay an EMT $20 an hour, that's $40,000 a year. If I can displace them with a paramedic that costs $90,000 a year, I take the $40,000 that I'm paying for that EMT, $50,000, which is half of the $100,000 that I put on. I paid the new medic $90,000. There should be enough money there. Right, it may not calculate out the way you have it.
You might have just said the answer. You're not recommending that we have 2 people around the clock. You're just recommending we have 2 people at 40 hours apiece that will cover 80 hours of the 336 hours.
Correct, because what I want to do is I want to save the town money because I'm a taxpayer. I want to step up into the more calls that we're getting with paramedics, so that makes, the state wants us to have paramedics. It's the best care that we can give our taxpayers.
Well, we've told the state we want to have paramedics. That's why the state's holding us accountable. If we told the state we want to have basics, the state would let us have the basics.
Yeah, so it's up to the community what level of service they want.
Right.
Absolutely. That's why it's got to go before the voters. And I just want a fair and accurate number to go before the voters. So if the voters support this, we have it staffed 24/7, 2 people full-time, because I think that's the argument that's going to be made to the voters. And I would push back and say that this number is too light to support that.
I think when you're paying per diem people, we're almost 24/7 right now with the 366 number. So by your calculations, that wouldn't even work. So why is that working?
I don't know, I can't see the numbers. Where's the sheets?
The reason why that's working is because we have all part-time people. The reason why that's working is because we have basics and medics that are coming in, and for the most part, I mean, like I say, I'm going to overshoot that 366 by $30,000 this year. So it'll be about $400,000. So if we add another 100,000, that's where I'm getting close to 500 on the other side of that. But I'm already doing what you say I can't do.
Okay, so I think, let's not go into,
Yeah. So, I mean, they're good questions, and you're going to want to answer them.
Yeah.
You're going to really want to do some, some
well,
cost
and
analysis.
especially if we're talking that, we had said early on that we might look at the idea that we might need to go for an override, and if we wanted to do that, I think we were all of the opinion, the only reason we were going to do that is because we needed to support the fire department.
Absolutely. And so
I
the
think what
questions
John
are.
was trying
It's a
to say-
one-time ask, and let's
Right,
make sure
one-time
it's
ask, is
accurate.
solo department, not mixed in with anything else, I think is kind of, had been our thinking. So if we want to do that, I think all you're trying to say is we need solid figures that we can go and make an argument to the voters to say, here's really what this is going to do. So however we calculate who's where.
Absolutely, and that's why it's difficult, because I absolutely appreciate what John is saying, because it's a challenge. He adds up a number, and I'm standing at a podium. It's hard to react to that number, and so I'm trying to tell you how I got to the number that I got to.
We understand your thinking, okay. So but the idea, just to clarify this, so the round-the-clock idea, though, by having 2 paramedics on, you're still looking to have only 1 paramedic on that night shift, right? Because right now.
At least one. The idea is we need at least one.
Right, because you're covering with 2 basics now, which is why we can't take a call, and we have to pay
Well, we can
Easthampton
take
sometimes.
when they're there,
Or
it's an intercept.
Depending on what the call is,
Yep.
right,
Yep.
okay, got it.
And I'm sorry, because they're complicated questions.
No, no.
They're not just
Understood.
straightforward.
Okay.
And John, I'm sorry, those are good questions, and I do appreciate that there are
I
different
think
ways
you'd
to go.
agree with me when I'm trying to give you another
I know you're trying to,
$300,000,
but the only,
fight.
but the only thing is, I look at it and I say, we're already doing it now.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to save the taxpayers some money. I don't want to just sit here, come up here and say, we need to hire all full-time people and get rid of our part-time staff, because that's not the most efficient way to do it.
Right.
I think that, and with a 2.5 override,
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're going to cover most of where we need to go. Will it be good for, 50 years? I mean, you're going to have to do something at some
And just to
time.
clarify, I think what we were understanding was 2 paramedics is what you want to do, but those would be full-time,
Positions, correct.
2 full-time positions, so that's a big difference from just the paid fire
Covering
chief
3
right now.
shifts.
That's
And that
correct.
would cover the
And an administrative
Right,
assistant.
which we'll talk about too, I think, because of,
Because the administrative assistant could be also a basic EMT.
right.
And now you have more opportunity to cover a second call with the chief when it goes out.
Okay,
And now it's not going to cover every call, because the chief's only going to be working there, the administrative assistant.
Right.
I mean, they're probably
Could be
going to.
paired up with that.
Yeah, they're going to be
Yeah.
paired in their hours.
okay, yeah. Becky, feel free to jump in anytime, just give me a,
Yeah.
give me a
And John,
high sign.
John, I appreciate you trying to get more money for me. And I'm trying to do both things. I'm trying to give a realistic expectation of what we can do for the least amount of money.
Got it, okay. Rini?
Chief, you mentioned when you were in Belchertown that you had written a grant, and then when we went to visit the Hadley Public Safety Complex, they also mentioned that he had to get going because he had to write
A
this
safer grant.
And then the same thing, the Granby folks, that when they go from being full on-call service and they start to have permanent staff, that the, what you call it, a safer grant, where you get a lot of money, as much as $1 million, and then it decreases over time so that
Correct.
within 5 years, the town
Yeah.
is absorbing that.
Correct.
I'm just wondering, that would be a really perfect option for us. It seems like we're a little late on that, though.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge is, I'm one person, and I have 50 part-time employees. I do more reports, when it comes for efficiencies committees. Well, I just met with ISO. I'm managing all the EMS side of the house, which is, even with different people doing different things, there's very much to it. I've got employee issues, things. Every call gets looked at, and everything gets scrutinized. The amount of paperwork just in regards to certifications, M&Ms.
Well, no, I'm just saying, we have a grants committee now, so, it's, it's,
Yeah, so if the grants committee, so if the grants committee want to step up and do one of those safer grants, you absolutely could.
Okay.
And it's not,
We'll put it on our list.
it's not beyond the realm. I mean, I have done them before.
It's a lot of money, though, to
It's
get
a
$1
lot
million.
it's a lot of money, but you also got to be,
What we need.
as soon as you go on the safer grant, you're going to go more towards what John is talking about. So where John says, okay, full-time people throughout the thing, paid, not just per diem full-time coverage, but paid full-time people. Now you're calculating numbers like John's calculating numbers, because he's saying that, it's going to be,
Got to add in the benefits after that.
you're going to add in the benefits at $700,000 as opposed to $400,000.
Okay, let's keep on rolling. So just to say that the
No,
fire
this is good
department-
information to get
the
out,
fire
though.
department themselves have done a lot of the smaller grants. I mean, you guys have done that all on your own without any assistance.
If I can write a grant in a day or two and not be
Yeah.
too distracted by what I call whack-a-mole, which is the next
These
thing
that
that
take
comes up.
weeks are not easy to do, certainly without.
Yeah, but I mean, I've
So-
probably only written a total of maybe, $150,000 worth of grants? I mean, I've been here for 10 years.
That's fine.
Yeah,
So what
I
I'm
wish I
looking
could-
at here, I just want to be sure I'm on the right page here, Bradley. I'm sorry. I'm looking at my budget from 320, right? And if I'm looking at the fire page, budget 2, wish list, I've got 951 as a total.
Right,
Yep.
that's what I have, yeah.
So something isn't,
Got from Bradley, it's there.
Oh, I can't watch that.
Right there. 951.
There it is.
okay, but then how does that tie into the other sheet you were just showing then? Because those totals weren't the same. Have you
The one
added?
where he has the explanations, Bradley, that you just had up there.
Yeah,
Okay. And it could be, because one of the things when I had originally come in front of you was to add $100,000.
yeah, so we've
And
got 929 there, so,
okay, that's an addition, because I use an Excel program. I'm not sure why that's off. I'm not sure whether one of the numbers I had is off.
I mean, maybe the Excel sheet got updated and the
EMS
budget narrative
expenses.
didn't get updated?
EMS expenses on here is 50,000, right? Second to bottom.
Right.
And in the budget, it's 66,941.
66,941 in the budget.
Oh, okay. So yes, when I went through, because Ed and Bradley had helped me in regards to some of the costs for fixed costs, some of the contractual costs, because in the past, with the budget being so, depending on coverage, I would often have extra money as I tried to address some of the challenges we had with reviewing of calls and those I would hire companies to do different things contractually. And I always tried to cover them within my budget. And for the 10 years I've been here, I've always had my budget and never gone over.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first year in 10 years that I've been over on my budget. And I know why, and I'd be happy to explain that. And so when I went through with Ed and Bradley, they helped me recognize what it is they were looking for and how I should be accounting for contractual costs,
So then
which
just-
then got added in by Bradley.
Yeah.
So,
So as long as that tab totals up into the overall total, which I think it does, it's more just the narrative didn't catch up to that.
the
So,
narrative did not.
again, as we talk about going before the voters and maybe doing something as an override, that narrative has got to be.
We need to make that right.
So, we've got
Absolutely.
to do that. So
You need the
just to know that
information,
there's
I
a-
need to provide it to
Yeah,
you.
there's a disconnect there. Just
Yes.
to point that out.
And
Okay.
it's an important one.
How about other pieces of the
Oh,
budget that
sure.
are-
So ambulance billing, I mean, right now we're billing at 8,000. I believe because we're doing more calls, I mean, there's a very good chance, and I believe my projections are that that's going to go up by $9,000. If you want to go down, I actually break the line items down individually. So you can see exactly what I budgeted for to try and make because my ambulance expense is $44,000 and it's $43,996. Oops, you're going
Back up, so that
right there, $43,946. So that's what I sort of budget, and I often have to adjust that. So like I have a $750 clothing allowance. Well, I'm only going to be here for a couple months. I didn't buy clothes this year. After 33 years, I got a whole bunch of white shirts and blue pants. So I didn't buy any clothes. So I adjusted it and such. And then if you look to the far right is where I expect the additional costs that we're going to have to spend. So just right there, stop for a sec, Brad. So right there with fuel usage, in the past, fuel usage never got charged to the fire department. And there was a couple of times back when Vicki was in where her assistant would take some fuel out, but then that sort of went away and we weren't charged it. All of a sudden this year, I started getting fuel bills. And honestly, it's a good thing in that I have to justify for Medicare how much money we spend on the ambulance. So I think it's appropriate that the fire department account for the costs that they spend in fuel. The problem is on a $44,000 budget that I have, I've already spent $4,350, and I'm projecting that we're going to spend probably $4,500 additional. So that's going to hit my budget by $10,000. On a $44,000 budget, that's a quarter of the budget that I was not expecting from last year, and now I'm paying this year.
Understood.
The other thing that I added in, because I wanted to add in everything because I don't want to be short, because I know we hate that, is there's a one-time cost for an IV pump. And the IV pump is, it's a $6,000 expense. Those are actually for two. The cost used to be almost $6,000 or $7,000 a piece. The state held back on mandating it. Now they're looking for us to get there again. They give us medications that we have on our ambulances that can only be given through an IV pump. And so proactively, I'd like to get into the IV pump because there's training time and everything else to get into it. So I added that in to my overage cost. Software, truck checks, that's just, $847. Do I expect to spend another, $100? I'm sorry, software for truck checks. I'm going to be paying another $934. So everything on the right-hand column is what I project out to the end of the year that I'll still be paying. And if you scroll up, Bradley, if you would.
Chief, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Have you considered the pump as a capital expense?
We certainly, a tanker, is that what we're referring to?
No.
The IV pump.
The
The IV pump.
5,000.
Yeah, we could certainly do that. Yep. I know that when I had written up the capital expense, it wasn't to the point where they were going to be requiring it. So it wasn't submitted with that capital plan. But now that it's one of the things that they're looking for, it certainly does fit the parameters and is a great idea. We could add it to that. Because it really should be, ideally it'd be a one-time cost. It's hard when the budget is so tight, so I'm just trying to fit things in.
Some of the other things I think that you weren't counting on, from what I understood earlier, were some of the, what do you call it, software maintenance or software contracts?
But I went back through because one of the things, they'd sent me a bill which was erroneous. And I went back through and I had one software contract that was, you'd have to scroll up, I forget the exact numbers.
The Boundtree?
Is it the AmbiPro? No.
The Boundtree?
No, Boundtree's a medical.
Medical supplies.
The agreements, the LP15, that's our monitor. That cost is actually due now.
Yeah.
And those monitors are $40,000. And if it doesn't get paid this month and they break, that's a problem. That's why I've been really trying to get this to you, because I need to be able to overspend that budget line item. So that went from $3,900 to just $4,400 just for that heart monitor. And then there's the Lucases that went from $750 to $882. None of those costs had ever been put into my budget contractually. So, when I recognized better what Ed and Bradley were looking for, those really are contractual numbers that were never accounted for. I'd always accounted for them by when we didn't have enough coverage and there was money left over, I paid them.
Okay.
So the other one is, if you go to Boundtree, Boundtree is a medical distributor for medical stuff. As we do more calls, we spend more money on medical equipment. Last year, we spent a total of $14,000. This year, with still 127 days left to go, and that probably is not, maybe a little bit different now, but we've already spent $17,000. I'm projected to easily spend, and that's trying to curb stuff as best I can, that we're going to spend another $3,000 before this year is done. Can I do my best to try and hold off on supplies? Absolutely I can, but that's a challenge, because the more calls we do, the more we spend. So those are the big ticket items in that. Is there any other questions in that part of that?
I guess I wanted to get a sense of, back on the budget sheet itself, if we're looking at where we've been this year and your wish list, and we were thinking of having to possibly do an override, what's our figure right now that we think might be there? It's in the couple hundred thousands, I think?
Yeah, it's a couple 100,000, and honestly, I'm with John in that we should really spend some time probably sitting together to really, try and nail those numbers down. I could use some help doing that. I mean,
If you use the fire sheet separate, Bradley, just its own sheet, if I'm looking at the right
I
thing.
wonder it would be helpful to sit down with the finance committee and
Right.
kind
Sure.
of hash out the
Yeah,
numbers.
absolutely. Because what we want to do is we want to reach out to other communities, sift through some of those contracts, because with an employee, just like police, they're going to have a contract and probably a union. All of a sudden, we need to really look at that as a community, because we don't want, as John had said earlier, we don't want surprises. We don't want to do it a 2.5 override and have a surprise. We want to really get what's a realistic number, not do a Belchertown where you're paying the cheapest, kind of go middle of the road and see what those numbers are. And I think we can then more factually draw up a 2.5 override. I think that some of the benefit that we have here is that if we, so far, everything I've proposed has built more revenue. So as a business, I feel like I've done a successful job with this town for gaining revenue and managing a department. My projections, I've worked them, they're close, they could be refined, and I think it's a good idea. But the idea is to gain more revenue still and maximize so that we're covering more calls. That's we want to, number one, provide service. So we may not be a private ambulance service that's just going to try and minimize and have one medic that does a fly car and is probably serving Holyoke rather than Southampton. I want to provide the best level of service that we can to Southampton.
Got it.
And maximize what we can get for revenue, but not expect the department to pay for itself. When a private ambulance service comes in, they try and minimize everything. You're going to get the minimum care, the minimum coverage, so that they can maximize profits. I'm not maximizing profits, for that purpose. I'm maximizing profits because I want to save on my taxes, but it's not going to pay for itself. This department is not designed to pay for itself. If we can increase our revenue, which is projected at $318,000 this year, which is almost $150,000 above what we had last year, which is a pretty solid number from all projections. I'm hoping with additional couple people that you put on that you're going to raise that revenue. I'd like to think you're going to raise it by $100,000. Now, it's a crystal ball. I don't want to be quoted as a guarantee for that, but it's I've been in the business a little bit. I think it's a pretty good guess. If we raise it by that, we've already raised it by $150,000. If we can raise it by another $100,000, we've almost offset that 2.5 override. And we're getting a better level of service.
Okay. Becky, any questions on your end that you're looking at? Yeah?
I talk a lot, huh?
Anybody? Questions on this? The one thing I guess it's not in here is just talk about equipment for a minute.
Sure.
We know we just paid off the last bill on the ambulance, right?
Yep.
Last year, I believe, so that's
Yep.
out of...
And the truck replacement schedule, I don't have it in front of me. I believe we were looking to get a second ambulance. Like Westfield gets a new ambulance every 5 years. We don't do that same call volume. I was looking to replace an ambulance every 8 years. So on a 16-year, so a lifespan of an ambulance would be 16 years. So as soon as you get a new ambulance, your 8-year-old ambulance becomes your second ambulance. As that one ages, do-si-dos again.
Okay.
What about the fire trucks?
Fire trucks are a different story. Fire trucks are a lot of money.
How I don't know what the year of the two primaries are.
Some of the challenge that I had when I came in was the ambulances were 1 year apart, a 2008 and a 2009. So when we got a new ambulance, I want to say, and I'm shooting from the hip, I want to say 2018, it would have been 2017. But at any rate, at least it balanced it at that point so that our second ambulance, which is a 2008, if we replace it in 2020.
I'm good with the ambulances, John, but
Yep.
the fire trucks.
Okay, so fire trucks are a 2005 is engine 3, 2010 for engine 4. Our engine 1, which is really a tanker, And that one is probably, oh, I should know that. I want to say it's
I think you told me at one point it was late 25 years old at least.
Yeah, it's about 25 years old.
Late 90s or something.
Yeah, that's about right. But I don't remember exactly, so I hate to be quoted on it, but it's about a 1995-ish. And some of the challenge that we have, and again, I don't mean to go off, in 2015, the Select Board was concerned for the rising costs in the EMS service. They spent $20,000 to bring a company in to assess EMS, and should we be private or where should we be? That company had come in, they'd done an assessment, they basically said, you could have started as a private service and carried forward, but you're already established, you've invested in ambulances, you've invested in monitors, you're on a good path, and so you're better off just continuing where you are. One thing that they suggested on the fire side was that we had 3, they consider our tanker and engine, it says engine on it, but it holds a decent amount of water, and there's not much difference NFPA-wise. They said because there's 3 of them, we don't need that 3rd one. Okay, I got limited budget. When I came, none of them would pass a pump test. They had never been tested in a pump test. There's a requirement and a liability that the town has, that I have personally, to the men and women that fight fires, that those get tested and that they can pump water and keep them safe, that and ladder testing, and a whole bunch of stuff that needed to happen. When that tank one went out of service, it failed a pump test by a couple hundred pounds of pressure, which is, I mean, it's, you know, it's designed for 1,000 gallons per minute. It was pumping, I want to say 850 or 900. I didn't have the money to rebuild that pump. Because of that survey, that assessment of the fire department that came out in 2015, it said, don't spend money on it. Okay, I didn't spend any money on it. It's a backup piece, ends up down at Station 2. We don't have any room in the station for it really anyway. It sort of started to go mothball. Well, it's an old truck, it's 25 years old, but it's a good truck, it's 4-wheel drive, and believe me, and 4-wheel drive doesn't mean I can take it across the lawn here, because I've paid for that truck to be towed out of a lawn once, because it's still a heavy truck and will sink. But it gives it a little bit more stability when you're trying to get up dirt roads. The men and women of the department like that truck because it's a good old truck, good old girl, as they say, and they had taken on their own time to rebuilding the pump on it. And I don't know if you noticed, it's actually out front today. So that pump, I'm trying to do an assessment now because with its tanker affiliate, we call it a tanker, which is fair, and we may be able to get around the pump test. So that couple 100 gallons a minute that it doesn't pump to capacity, we may be able to get past with. It's not a great thing, but if I can put it in service, it's a good thing for the community. When ISO, which is the insurance people that come to assess the department, water department, fire department, and they determine your insurance rate by how much they times whatever their stuff is to figure out how much they're going to charge each homeowner. He said, well, you've only got 2 engines. I said, yeah, because of a 2015 thing, I only got 2 engines. He said, well, if you had a 3rd, otherwise you're going to go down in your ISO rating, which means we're all paying more for insurance. That includes me. I said, well, as you can see by my record keeping, I have phenomenal record keeping for all of the pump tests, the flow testing on equipment, the tanks, ladder testing, everything else. I said, I've got a truck that my guys have rebuilt. If I can get that pump tested, would you accept that to keep our rating up? He said, you've done a great job with your record keeping. If you put that pump back together, I'll take that. And he did. Mm-hmm. So we're in the process of, and that's why you see it out front. Because after I realized it was going to cost everybody in Southampton more money if we didn't have it going, I don't care what that report said in 2015, I'm going to do my best to put that truck back in service.
As a secondary unit?
As a secondary unit.
So that leaves you with two engines?
We have,
or is one really a pumper?
No, we had, well, pumper engine. They're
How much water does each one carry?
so each one carries 1,000 gallons in their booster tank.
Yep.
The two frontline pieces, the 2005 and the 2009, have a 1250 GPM pump, so gallon per minute pump. The backup engine, the tanker, as we want to call it, it just has a 1,000-gallon booster, but it carries all of the portable folding tanks that we need. It carries some what we call LDH, large diameter hose, for supply lines.
And that's the only truck that has that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
yeah.
capable of, that one's capable of more than,
That could draft.
Well, they all can draft.
yeah.
Well, you said, they all
The
have
only
the
thing-
hard hose?
the only thing
They all
that-
have the hard hose?
They all have the hard hose.
Okay.
But this one can carry with the portable tanks. This can carry more than the
It just,
1,000.
it offers a little bit more opportunity. So what we did, because that one went out of service, when there's a call that comes in, and I'm sure we're going to deal with this and you folks have dealt with it, there's an automatic mutual aid call that goes out. So as soon as we have a structure fire, like the last two, Russellville and Maple Street, we sent out our two engines, and there's an automatic for two additional engine companies and a tanker from Westhampton. Since the Maple Street fire, we're updating that run card so that on automatic, if there's any structure fire reported, we're getting 3 tankers now that are becoming our way. If I can put this truck back in service, it gives us another 1,000 gallons, which on that Maple Street fire would have been critical. I mean, if we hadn't, had a truck that had left the roadway and blocked the road, there's a very good chance that would have been a successful fire that you wouldn't have been hearing about.
Right. So of the two frontline units that you have right now, one's an 05, one's an 09?
Correct.
Right, so the 05 being the oldest?
Yep.
Which would put it at, what, 12?
17.
17 years?
Yeah, and I did a truck replacement schedule, because there was none. When I came here, I did a truck replacement schedule. I look at an engine to be a 30-year replacement. And depending on, like a tanker can almost be, depending on, because they don't tend to get as much use, they can almost go on a 40-year replacement.
40?
40, depending on use and, how things change. So that's the truck replacement schedule that you folks should have that I had done when I came in 10 years ago. So is there,
Right now, based on the age of the front units, you don't anticipate a need to replace either one of those in the next 5 years?
I don't. Yeah, because our two frontline engines, I've actually set them up. I mean, they carry some vital equipment, which is good. Both jaws, ladders, and some things that won't fit on that older truck. The older truck is smaller. It doesn't accommodate personnel so well. It does a couple of things in the sort of the tanker mode that we don't currently have. But our second engine, which has more equipment, it carries the same amount of water. So that's why, and that's why we've been able to, I mean, our fire attack, which, in Belchertown had the same sort of ratio of hydrants to non-hydrant areas. And the tanker that we had there was a 1,000-gallon tanker, the same as the engine that we have here.
So this pump that they're working on, the rebuilt pump part of it.
Yes.
With that, if it can pass the inspection,
I don't know if it'll pass its pump inspection. That's what I'm trying to research now.
To
I'm
see-
trying to get it back in service because I think it'll be valuable for our community, especially after the Maple
so
Street
if
fire.
it could pass its pump inspection, it's good for another 5 years or so at least on the road, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, it's getting to be an old truck.
Any idea what a new pumper costs?
I would only be guessing, but you're probably $500,000.
Okay.
So, yeah, and, I mean, ladder trucks are well over $1 million now. And I'm just shooting from the hip at $500,000. So I'd want to research that before you held me to it.
I think you're pretty close.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
You hope I'm
Okay.
close.
Anybody else have some questions of John while he's here? John, go ahead.
I don't have any questions, just a comment. I mean, I do think that we're heading towards the override on this, and I mean, just for the committee's point of view, we've got 16 working days to get this done, if we're going to meet the April 18th deadline.
I know.
Yeah. So if we could, I'd be happy to work with somebody to do it. I mean, because I think it's important to come up with a good number. Like I say, I may be retired, but I'm going to be paying taxes here as I live in town. So I want it to be a good number that not only is fair to taxpayers, but also provides the service that we need for the community.
Well, I think we've got to definitely update the budget worksheet to match the spreadsheet, to be sure that
Yeah,
for
and
one, but then be sure that we really have the costs, well laid out and well explained in terms of what we're really asking for there. So that we
And they're not far off. Like I say, the difference is really where Ed and Bradley helped me understand better what they were looking for. We do need to accommodate some of the costs that I hadn't been accommodating before.
Sure, understood.
But they're between 929 and 969, so they're about $40,000 off.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I don't know, John, would you have any time to work on budget questions or issues with them? Or, I mean, I wasn't sure what you were wanting to see from Bradley. If we get this up.
No, not necessarily from Bradley.
Oh.
It's whatever the final numbers are going to be, where is the narrative and the backup and the supporting narrative? Because I think it's going to be up to the five of us at the town meeting to get up and defend it.
Well,
If we're not able to, you won't be retired.
I'll defend it. Like I said, I want this to be successful.
It'll still be there, I think.
But I also, it's important to have your backing. So, I think as we move forward, I think if we share some numbers, you ask questions, it's much easier when you ask a question if I have some stuff in front of me.
Yeah.
Because to answer at a podium is a challenge.
Okay.
No, that's fair enough.
But we're close. Like I say, we're $40,000 in off between the adjustments that I made with Ed and Bradley, and the numbers, because I'd just done factual numbers, because I really wanted historic numbers of what I'm spending now and what we really needed to accommodate for.
Okay. Francine, anything? Rini? Okay.
I feel like I talk a lot.
You did, but you got a lot of information out there.
Yeah, good.
So,
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time.
Becky, anything?
And happy for any more
Good.
questions that you guys
No,
have.
I'm sure we'll be back at you somewhere amongst us or, through Bradley and Ed to get back to you to really get this tidied up if we get to the point where this is really going to be something that we're going to do as a standalone.
I think we
gotta
need.
have it tight.
I think we need to. So it would be good to have it clear. All right. Thank you all. Thank you guys.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your time. Thank you, thank you. Okay,
Okay, so we're off to Norris.
all righty. Now we can all go to school. So, we're starting with Norris first, or what are we doing?
We kind of choreographed the
Okay.
script.
Okay.
Try to make it simple.
thank you.
This is everything before that last page. The number 2 pencil.
Yeah.
So it'll be short since I have to stand. So John Lambert, Chair of the local school committee. First, we're just going to start with a little history on how the whole budget is put together and our unique situation being the regional district we are. Some of you that this may be new, and some of you may know all this stuff, but beginning of the year, there's first two things we have to do is we have to determine the assessments, and there's two different assessments calculated. The first one is the assessment that determines how central office costs are allocated through all 5 communities, and that being Chesterfield, Goshen, Southampton, Westhampton, Williamsburg, and then Hampshire Regional High School, middle school as a whole. And that is based on the October 1st foundation enrollment numbers as reported to DESE, D-E-S-E. And you can see this particular year in '24, over '23, Southampton, middle of the page, our enrollment, cumulative enrollment. Now, these are all the children that the superintendent of schools has jurisdiction over and responsibility for. So of the 1,505 children, 550 of them are Southampton residents. So our assessment is 36.54%. So any dollar spent at central office, Southampton, the town, through Norris, gets charged 36.54. We also get charged a portion of the Hampshire regional piece because we're one of the communities that makes up that high school, middle school, and that's going to be a different calculation on the next page where that 33.22 gets switched out or reduced down. So year over year, without a single increase to the budget, we already know that if it was a flat budget, Southampton, Norris's cost for central office is going up 2.2%. Okay? We flip the page, somewhat the same philosophy here, but here the children in the district are only grades 7 through 12. So this is just looking at the children attending Hampshire Regional Middle School and the high school. And again, Southampton's middle of the page. We are 321, but under our 1966 operating agreement, we don't take the single year, we take the 5-year rolling average. So that's why you'll see 21, 20, 19, and 18. So our 5-year rolling average is 351 children at the high school, which makes up 55.43% of all the kids up at the high school. So that earlier number, the 33.22 that gets assigned to Hampshire Regional, comes in here, and of that 33.22, we pay 55.43% of that number as it filters down.
Well, for FY23, it's 55.33, right? And you're going up
Correct.
55.43 for FY24?
Yep.
Okay, got it.
And so, yeah, so we went up, 10 basis points there, or a tenth. Now, the next page is just an example of how this works, because I'm not going to say it became a bone of contention in the budget process, but it was cost. Historically, there were costs, and in this specific example is health insurance. Traditionally, the health insurance for the employees in central office was just thrown in with the Hampshire Regional health insurance for all the teachers. So if you work at central office, regardless of what town you're in or from, you get the benefits that Hampshire Regional gets, okay? So that's $139,000. So the top section illustrates how it used to be done. We would take the $139,000, and based on the assessments, Southampton, which I refer to as Norris, would pick up $51,000 of that. And then $46,000 would be sent off to Hampshire Regional, of which we would pick up an additional 55.43, or another $25,000 of that. So our cumulative responsibility going that way is 54.9, or $76,000. What the so that is what is really happening there. So I just said it backwards. Down on the bottom is, if that only went to Hampshire Regional and we bypassed central office and we put the full 139 up at Hampshire Regional and ran that down because Southampton pays a bigger piece of what's there, we would be paying $77,000, which is, I mean, it's a $658 swing. But you can see some of the other communities. Chesterfield Goshen is now paying another $4,200. So the committees collectively believe that this is a fair and equitable thing. If the expense really belongs in Hampshire Regional, then it stays there. But if it's really central office, it needs to come out to central office. And however it falls out, and we pay the fair shares.
So the Westhampton amount in red down below?
Those are for me, it's accounting. Those were credits coming back. The difference between the top section, doing it how we do it now, and how we did do it, created a savings to the town of Southampton, or Norris, of $658.
And Westhampton, that's a savings of $3,300?
Correct. And Williamsburg, a savings of $196.
Got it.
And Chesterfield Goshen, because it all has to do with the enrollment numbers. Westhampton and Williamsburg are having significant declines in enrollment numbers, which some could say isn't our issue, but that just means our portion of Hampshire Regional is going to continue to increase every year, right? So I'm just going to walk through the central office budget, and then I'll hand it over to Kim for the high school piece, and then I can come back for the Norris, and then depending on what the questions are, there's a myriad of individuals here to answer them. So again, going back to that first page where we said, here are the allocations, Hampshire Regional 33.22, Southampton 36.54, you'll see that consistent all the way down, the numbers match up. So the first section is okay in superintendent's salary. There really no change there other than the contractual increases. And that's pretty much consistent all the way down through here. there is a, on there is a credit on the healthcare coordinator, but that's because the funding sources have changed in that position. The second page, it's,
Before you switch to
Go
that,
ahead.
can you just go back to the second block there? The admin clerical salary, what is that?
that is the support staff within central office, and specifically the increase has to do with the adjustment of the confidential administrative assistant to the superintendent.
So is that a new position?
It's a reclass, so under Superintendent Osborne, going backwards, it was not a confidential employee. So new position has new job description, new classification, yes. But there was a body there before she transferred over into accounting, I believe, right? Yeah.
So how many positions does this represent?
Oh, all the support staff at central office?
Yeah, how many positions is that?
Four? Yep, four.
Four.
4 full-time?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Second page, the same thing. We're just, how, in 23 budget, it was allocated across. Same thing happened in 24. When we get to the next page that is colored in blue, these are things that you can see, it says page 3, line 73 here for me, $10,000 for superintendent office supplies. In the old budget, in 23's budget, that is money that's allocated for the superintendent for supplies within central office. That entire $10,000 was being sent over to Hampshire Regional and then allocated down through there. And what we said is, and when I say we, I mean the collective school boards, we said that's not a Hampshire Regional High School cost. That's a central office cost. Therefore, it needs to be allocated out to the communities in the fair and equitable way, as I demonstrated earlier. And that's the same story as we go down along these lines here.
Can I just ask, back
Yep.
up a second? The
Yep.
right-hand column are increases? The far right?
Yeah.
The, like on that, well,
Yeah.
like under
394.
admin travel, it's a decrease of 394, you mean?
Right here, the last column here. These are all increases? Yeah, right. So the curriculum director then is an increase of 11,000?
Now,
Go ahead.
it looks like that, but when General talked before about.
I think you have to go to the podium.
I think we have to come up to the mic so we can hear you, sorry.
And the same director of technology is a $12,000 increase. Is that contractual?
So while it looks like these positions are getting huge increases, they're not at all. So the way they've done it in the past, that if the curriculum coordinator salary was, let's say, $100,000, it would not be representative of $100,000 in the paper. Her position is offset by grants, $12,000. So her salary, it looks like she got a $12,000 bump. I'm using that as an example, but she didn't, because it's offset by 240 grants, Title I grants.
So wouldn't that make it less?
No, so we,
At the end of the budget section, you're going to see the revenues come back in.
The offset at the bottom.
Right.
Yeah, the
offset's at the
offset.
top.
Right.
Where I've been saying for Norris's example, we used to load up school choice and hide a lot of things in school choice, nobody knew what it was.
Right.
And the perfect example for Norris is the vice principal, right? We've had one forever.
Right.
You would never find that in the budget.
Right.
Because it's hidden in school choice. So now it's up in the expense, so you can see the line item, and then the school choice number is increased appropriately. So it's offset in the budget, but you can see the detail.
Okay, but here it looks like there's a $12,000
So that's the Director of Technology. So the Director of Technology, I think under the Worthington agreement that we have, there was a revenue line item that came in of either $5,000 or $7,000. So that's an example of where, instead of doing, we were only showing the 95, we were showing the net number. Now we're saying we want to show the gross of the 107 and not bury that offset, so you can clearly see If you look at the W-2 wage for the person that was there before, it's going to be around that 107.
That is,
in the
yep,
middle of the year.
that is a perfect example of why we've changed formats for our documents. So looking at this document, it does look like the Director of IT made 95 last year and is jumping up 12,000. Last year, that person's salary was 107,541, the exact same salary, not a penny less, not a penny more.
And
So the off,
12,236 is grant money.
It's a Worthington revenue share agreement.
right, so between the money that we get from Worthington for our agreement for central office costs, as well as offsets for entitlement grants, special ed grants, that totals $12,000. So we want it to be reflective in our document. What are these actual salaries cost? So going forward next year, then you'll see, you won't see these huge raises. This is a one-time rate. We just wanted everybody to know the exact cost and be very transparent about what every town was paying and what every salary was for every position.
Okay.
And it's also a different way of accounting. So with our new business administrator, we decided let's show all of our salaries first and then offsets on the bottom, while before they did offsets first and then what's left over.
But this is an expense sheet, so I'm not sure. I mean, you're making it sound like it's a revenue number.
No, the true expense is 107. I would argue that the current budget of 95,000 is not the true expense. This year, it really is 107.
Okay, of that, and of that number, 12,000 is what? Money that comes in for
From
grants?
Yes,
So
or revenue.
that last column is a
We now
revenue.
report at the bottom of our summary sheets.
Okay.
In great detail.
Okay.
So this last column is essentially a revenue column, all the way down?
That's the difference. Those are just the difference year to year. Some of them are there are
Yeah.
contractual increases in here.
Okay.
So like, for example, the curriculum director, so that's 11,029 difference.
Correct, because some of her money was buried in Title I grants.
Okay.
And, yes, and Medicaid and the Worthington agreement.
Right.
So
Okay.
that current salary this year, it says $92,000 for this current year.
Okay.
It's actually $103,000. So that position is not getting a raise at all. It's level funded for that, but we wanted to be very clear to show that of the budget, the operating budget that the townspeople were paying for, it was $92,000. But $11,000 was offset between entitlement grants, Medicaid, the Worthington agreement.
Which doesn't show anywhere up on the 23 budget.
Okay. So essentially, if that person is still in the $103,000 range, what you're showing here, if I'm understanding this, is that out of that real total, 11,000 of that is coming from
Yes.
other
Other
places.
sources.
Other than the
It's not
general
coming
tax
directly
revenue.
from here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we wanted
Okay.
the salaries accurately reflected.
Okay, well, there was no really heading for this particular column,
Yeah.
so it wasn't really
Yeah.
clear, like, what those figures represent.
Yep.
So for the $5,000 in curriculum supplies, $30,000 is what's been spent, but it was district-wide, it wasn't just the,
This one here, 30,000, that is the current 23 budget. And in this particular case, they're asking for a $5,000 increase in the 24 budget.
okay, so this is a central office,
Correct. So
Expense.
that is when the.
so the 5,000 doesn't represent grants or anything else, it represents an
Pure
increase.
increase in the budget to cover additional, so that
And is
is
this-
there in part to support 2 additional half-day system-wide professional development days that are in the 24 budget.
Okay. Well, maybe as we keep going, maybe this will be
wait a
clearer
minute.
as we go. Yeah.
So this isn't supplies, this isn't,
So this is district-wide supplies, so it is things like textbooks, and things are coded different way, but it's also things like for professional development. So if we want to hire a contracted service, or we're going to need materials for that, it would come out of this. So one of our goals for next year is to align our curriculum. We're going to need new materials, new professional development, more money for people to stay after school to learn things, so that's why we increased that by $5,000.
you don't have a separate line for professional development? It's
Not
embedded in
from the
curriculum
central
supplies?
Central office, this is only in central office. So the director of curriculum at central office, that's their supply item for curriculum and textbooks, and that, it's a piece. Yes, each each school
Also
has
has-
its own support. It says Norris has its own line item for what Norris specifically does on its end. But this line item is for the entire system when all 5 districts or schools are.
Okay, yeah.
So these funds will be used for curriculum supplies.
Correct.
Becky, you had a question?
No, go ahead, Becky.
I just had a question about that. I see how you're recording the 2 years. So, for example, when we were talking about the 11,000, can you just point to me where those offsets are in the, on this sheet?
Yeah.
Does it just-
Because what it shows here is like $28,000, and I know it's much more than that.
You're probably looking, you skipped
Well, this is special revenue, so I'm looking, I skipped to the end.
Right.
I did.
Okay.
Set up to mark you down the main.
Okay,
Well, we'll keep
all
going.
right.
I could have walked you line by line.
We'll come
Okay.
back around. We're just eager beavers here, trying to look at the bottom line. Go ahead, yeah, keep going through.
So I will get to that. Okay? All right, so that's page 2. So page 3, this is blue.
Yep.
So on page 3, this is the middle column, starting with the 10,000, 21,000. Those are all expenses that, for the most part, historically, were shifted to Hampshire Regional and then filtered down, in which case, Southampton's case as a whole, we
Was
pay a greater share.
55%.
But superintendent's office supplies, the first one, is not a Hampshire Regional High School expense. It is a central office. So in the '24 budget, we shifted it over and said that needs to get allocated out proportionately. And that's all these coming down. And you'll notice the admin payroll clerk does not come down to the individual schools. That has to do with the regions are not permitted to use the local treasurers. There has to be a regional treasurer. And there's 2 people up there that do their payroll and things of that nature. And that's why those particular items don't come down to the elementary schools. For Norris, for example, we use our treasurer here in town to do our payroll.
So all these line items last year this current year are in the Hampshire Regional School budget. And we wanted to accurately reflect that this is a shared expense, meaning so different assessment percentages, and it's more equitable to do it this way, to put it where it belongs.
Makes sense.
And contractual travel for central office was zeroed out. Right?
Okay.
So that's just gone.
Hang on, John. Ed,
Yeah,
you
go
have a
ahead.
question? Yeah?
Yeah, I'd just like to back up a little bit. Bottom of page 1, top of page 2. Most of these groupings, all the titles or headings are the
Correct.
same, except that you've got admin software maintenance, business manager financial software,
And that's because.
business manager supply.
Yeah, that's just the way it was
Because at
inputted
the end of-
past.
At that, like the Westhampton one, that's actually how it reports on their individual budget line item right
I
now,
was wondering if that
Right, so that's whoever inputted it instead of saying,
matching them up.
yeah, exactly. You're-
All right? All right. So then when we get to the yellow, so I'm on page 4.
Yeah.
The yellow section, these are
New.
new. So they weren't there in the current budget we're in now. And these are new asks coming in.
Right. And we're looking to increase our revenue, and especially with competitive grants. So I wanted somebody who can, at least 0.5, give their time to looking only at competitive grants so they can support our buildings and our operations and our programming. So we changed some job descriptions and we restructured central office. And this is after I met with my administrative team to determine where are our gaps that we need additional support in. So what does that look like? A principal's day is already crazy as it is, but for example, Dean Bates at Westhampton, if there's a overflowing toilet, he's doing it. So that's not a principal's job. So we looked at those types of things, and with a couple of principal changes, we knew, like for maintenance, we needed more assistance in that. So we were going to offer these stipended positions that they're each $750 for facilities and food service. Because while everybody else has a support system, food service, for example, they all work in individual silos. So right now, they're all working separately on POS systems. So instead of each school calling each vendor separately and determining who's going to do what, it makes sense to everybody collaborate, come up with one system that works for everybody, K through 12. So this stipend would coordinate and plan the agendas for 4 annual meetings, and if there is an audit, they would be helpful in just providing an additional resource. But our cafeteria staff, our head cafeteria staff, they don't talk to each other just because they're just doing their individual jobs. And
By allowing this $1,500 investment for '24, we're looking in '25 to see a return on that investment by consolidation of vendors and buying in bulk.
So you're going to centralize purchasing.
You are, yeah, you're what?
First, we're going to force them all to get together
First,
and talk.
yes.
In theory, try to get on the same page. And if we're buying one POS system instead of 5 separate ones,
Okay,
we would think that there should be cost savings.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, at $1,500,
Yeah. And
that's a reasonable expectation.
And are we assuming that most of the schools are using the same vendors, though, or not even?
You would think.
Okay.
So, also, the new district technology supply line, there was nothing. So our IT director, if they needed to buy something, they had no budget to set it against, so it got hidden in some school somewhere. Here we're saying, you know, it really belongs there. I don't know where this other 5,000, in theory, it came from somebody else's budget,
But isn't that service currently contracted out?
currently, but it's only a temporary fix until we.
Oh, so the intention is to hire a full-time technology director?
I don't know
Well,
the
that's
jury's out on that right now.
Yeah, that's a whole separate meeting. But as far as, so if the secretaries or admin assistants or I need a new monitor or a laptop and we have to buy something new, before we would go to one of the other line items, usually superintendent's other superintendent expenses, and take it from there. So we just really wanted to be very clear and show that these are what our needs are, that $5,000 is strictly for technology. So, and it's not for superintendent other or special ed supplies.
Same thing goes on the next page with the fridge benefits.
Yeah, so that's life insurance, a cell phone policy, and an annuity.
For the superintendent, and then is it just the superintendent, or is there a placeholder there for the business administrator?
So admin, that's the business administrators. Mine is a separate line.
Historically, they would have just inflated the salary line item number and stuck that in there. Here we're saying it's a fringe benefit, it's not an hourly thing, it needs to be broken out.
Yeah.
Medicare, it came to light that, well, if we're, you know, and this is true, it's fair, that historically all the Medicare tax on payroll for central office, the 1.45, was all just being dumped in the high school. It was one lump number. So we took the wages in central office, multiplied by the 1.45, comes out to $14,878. That should be at central office. It shouldn't be over at Hampshire High School, right?
Yeah.
The new district physician is.
That's just another shared cost from
now
the,
it's one doctor for the entire system. In 2022, we had 2 different doctors on. Southampton and Westhampton shared a doctor. She retired. She was is a Southampton resident and was very generous and only charged us like $400 a year to do both schools. This new doctor comes in, he said, well, I'll do it for $5,000. Southampton had already passed this budget. We pushed back and said, we can't do it. The other communities for 23 pitched in the difference. We paid our $400. This year, we've got to pay our full share of the $1,800 going forward.
Now, this is just for the high school?
No, the physician?
Yeah.
No, that is the system-wide doctor.
For all the elementaries and the high school?
Right.
$5,000. Okay.
orders.
Is that Tim Parsons?
Who's the doctor?
Yes,
Okay.
Right.
it is.
He's the one that allows the nurses to give
doctor, yeah.
prescriptions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I go back, because that reminded me about the whole health coordinator and the changing of the position to another and keeping it full-time. So it's still listed as health coordinator here.
Right.
What page you on?
I'm on
Back on page 2.
back to,
Right now, we're working on a new title, new job description, and heard loud and clear the concern about nurse coverage.
Page 9.
However, the job description is solely for health education, so the nurse leader part wasn't written anywhere else. So one of the problems was that our job descriptions didn't have any dates on them. And if there's a couple of things floating around, we have no idea what's supposed to be used or not. So going forward, things are going a little different. So I've been working with our current coordinator to develop a job description that reflects the needs more accurately and the responsibilities that are currently being done. And instead of being the last person called when we need a substitute nurse at every building, this person will be the first person called. So therefore, it will also be saving the substitute nurse salaries, which is $250 out of pop. And the days when that's not needed, that person could be working on the health education piece.
Well, that doesn't recognize the importance of her job. That's basically doing somebody else's job instead of her own. So I'm not sure that's the solution that I would have selected for that, honestly. But in this line here, it says 65, and then it says 54. Does that mean that 11,000 of that is being
no, so
supported by grants or some other source?
Well, that current salary for this year, while it says, 65, 66, is actually like 76, but it's offset by Medicaid and grants. So we had changed the salary for next year, right now, $54,000. And if we need additional money, which we will, we're going to offset that by then using the grant money. So we're just doing it opposite. I just want to be very clear that this is without grants, without any kind of offsets. We want to show the accurate pay that a person was making. So there was nothing hidden.
So is the salary going down, or is it staying the same?
Is she still a 1.0?
Yes, it's still a 1.0.
In this position, or is it something less because there's point something for substitute nursing?
No, it's going to be a 1.0, and together we're working on the job description, the salary. We're doing our homework, working together, and that will be determined at a later date.
So you can't say whether her salary is being kept where it was or not right now?
I can't. It really depends on also the job responsibilities, but I can't tell you that right now. Right?
Maybe this will help. That individual, without naming names, that individual is at an expired contract. So they're in contract negotiations.
Okay.
With the employee.
Well, okay. Well, I will just go on the record as saying that I 100% support her being full-time, and I 100% support the recognition that her position is valuable and that she's not just going to be a first-time sub in the schools. Basically, I mean, you're basically asking her to do a different job and leaving the current job she has, so I don't know.
Well, she will be doing a different job, and it's not like she's just a traveling nurse. She will have the nurse leader responsibilities, but also the health education piece that has been missing. So every school right now there's not an aligned health curriculum, and the nurses do the health curriculum and along with the PE teacher at the schools. But in some schools, it might be a one-day lesson. In other schools, it might be a one-week lesson. And depending on what's going on in the nurse's office or who the nurse is, you could be learning about germs in one school and something completely else. So we need some consistency. I was just using that example because it's been a long time since I've had health at the elementary level. But there's no consistency at the elementary level. We recognize the importance of having health education at the elementary schools. It just needs to be aligned and coordinated. And also, I'm looking for safety grants and crisis team management. So
the point I was making is that you're asking someone to leave their job and do somebody else's job to save on nurse subs when you have enough nurse subs. So you're basically saying that her position is going to be maintained full-time to satisfy the concerns that were raised by boards of health and towns, but you're basically asking her to jump in and be a sub first line instead of using subs. That's what I just heard you say. So if that's the case, I don't support that. I support her being able to do her job, which isn't to be hired as a sub. So that's it. And right now, it's really hidden right now in what you're going to pay her, as far as what I can see.
So I have a big central office presentation where I'm very clear.
We all fought to have her position be a full-time, retained position, and right now you're not committing to her being paid at the level that she was paid up till now.
It will come out of grant funding.
Yeah. Okay, you're not willing to say that she's being retained at the same level and at the same full-time status that everybody jumped and told you about. So I'm just going on record as saying that because I think it's important that you recognize that.
And just to clarify, in terms of the health education part, so my understanding that there has been health education by somebody, but usually the PE teacher?
It depends on which school you're talking about.
Okay.
So again, the thought process is, regardless of what elementary school you're in, you should get the same curriculum, whether it's math, whether it's reading, writing, or health.
Yeah,
And
okay.
So Norris, yes, one of the senior nurse and the PE teacher do the health classes. One takes the boys, one takes the girls, and they go through the program. I would say that's not happening in the other elementary schools.
Got it, okay.
Because there's no document. So- And that's part of the coordination, someone's got to write up what this is.
Is there basically a curriculum that's out there from the state to do health education, or is this just, you got to start from scratch on this, or is this?
I think you would have to start from scratch and do your homework with different companies. I couldn't tell you because I haven't looked into health education curriculum. It's
Just
available.
interesting. I think there's been a lot of articles lately in terms of just the importance of health education in primary schools. I mean, it's becoming, more realistic in terms of people's understanding that this used to be kind of the norm for most of us growing up, and it's noticeably absent, I think, in most schools these days.
Right, and I would like this position also like work at the cafeteria. So food to farm to school grants are available, so we can, so I like to incorporate a little bit more health education, even as something simple as within our cafeterias. That just takes some coordination. I just want to repeat again, the job description has not been defined, but the current job description has nothing to do with nursing whatsoever, other than it says the person can administer medication in lieu of a nurse. That's it. It doesn't talk about any reporting or anything like that. That's why we are revising the title, the job responsibility, and the salary.
And what I'm saying is that this position was originally created because of the Essential School Health Services grant in the state of Massachusetts. That's where we got all the computers for school nurses. That's where we got the SNAP software program, and that they were paid out of a grant out of the state, and then slowly the communities took them on and hired nurse leaders, which I think is, some of them were called nurse leaders. I was a nurse leader for Hadley. Some of them were called health education coordinators. So Hampshire retained the title of health education coordinator. And what I'm saying is that this person is extremely valuable to our communities and to our schools and to the local boards of health, have played a critical role during the COVID pandemic, and I would hope that this position will be retained full-time. The curriculum director is not asked to sub for a teacher if a history teacher's out, the history curriculum person is not asked to go in and sub in the classroom. No, you get a sub for that. So I'm just saying that you got a lot of feedback from the communities about the importance of this particular position, and I hope that you're going to go on record as making that position whole, and that if the school nurses need a sub, that they have a sub, just like teachers get, and recognize the importance of that position in terms of salary.
And I appreciate you advocating for that position, but I think all of our employees are worth it and are doing an exceptional job and have a high skill level. And we're trying to restructure who has what job responsibilities.
Right.
That's all. It is going to be a 1.0.
I don't think the salary or position should be cut. So that's all I'm saying, and I think you have a lot of feedback about that as well.
It is a 1.0.
Right. And the salary right now, you're not going on record as saying that it's going to be what it was. So that's all I'm saying, is I would hope that you would consider not cutting her salary in hours. And that's what a lot of people gave you feedback about, so I hope you're willing to do that.
Okay. Moving on. Anybody else? Francine, questions?
No, that was right, though.
So the revenue offsets, some of them.
Yeah, I had a question.
A quick question about the new section.
The yellow,
So-
yep,
Yeah, so the district grant writers need to be,
correct.
correct? But when we're looking at like the technology supply line, you said that you previously had been taking 5,000 from someplace else?
Well, the
So-
bills were getting paid. They were
Right.
just, it's like, okay, what school, what line item has available funds, which just stick it there.
Okay, so it's a new line, but is it an additional 5,000?
Yeah,
Reducing?
that 5,000 is a new ask.
Correct.
It's a new money.
So it wasn't taken from the places that you spent it from previously?
Correct.
And that's what you're asking? This is new?
It's a new fund, yeah, new amount.
As well as the two above that.
And just back on the grant writer again, was that a half-time or a full-time position?
0.5. And we hope to increase that sooner rather than later. But it really depends on the quality grant writer that we get for that.
And would you expect that that would pay for itself?
That's the idea, yep.
That's what I was just going to say. What we would expect is most of the grants that we're seeing out there for the education, you have that tack-on piece that you can add on for administrative.
Right.
That would go back to support this person. And in theory, it's up and running for a year, then we could see the receipts coming in.
Yeah.
And be able to point to the offset a year from now.
Right, okay. All right.
Okay, so I covered Medicare and physicians, so that gets you to your bottom lines. The revenue offset for central office. Central office receives $28,000, and that $28,000 is the Medicare receipts, correct? Medicaid receipts that come in through the work of the central office. So again, historically, Hampshire Regional will get the full credit for that as an offset. We're saying this is work being done on the central office, coordinator, that this is where these receipts cut. The receipts are being generated because of work done in the central office, and therefore the credit should come in to reduce the burden of those expenses.
Can I ask a question about that? So Medicaid, when you're paid Medicaid, is it based on a particular pupil that is accessing a Medicaid benefit?
Medicaid or Medicare?
Medicaid.
Medicaid.
I haven't looked at the billing. I know it's billings done for services provided within the nurses' offices through the region.
Pardon?
Depending on the service they provide to what student.
So it is student-specific, but it's still clustered up based on the percentage of the district. So it's not like if you have all of the students from Southampton that are actually receiving Medicaid benefits and none from the other towns, it's still considered a shared central office reimbursement, correct?
Yes.
So Southampton doesn't get more credit for it because the service is primarily received, a reimbursement is received because the students are from Southampton. It's still a shared income source based on the percentage that the towns represent the district.
Right, that's the way it's...
At Hampshire Regional level, we get 100% of the
Right.
Norris level.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Okay.
I was just curious of how that was, how that came in.
Okay. Kim, you want to go over?
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Kim Schott. I'm the chair of the Hampshire Regional School Committee. So the next page that you have in your packet after the central office information is the cost center recap for the final budget that Hampshire Regional approved at our March 6th meeting. So what you will see there is that for fiscal '24, we have an increase of $1,083,890.22. Out of that, just a couple of things I want to highlight. There are significant costs that are beyond our control that make up a lot of that increase. Our contractual obligation with our transportation, some extraordinary increases in special ed out-of-district placement, and the 6% increase in health insurance. Just those three things combined total almost $887,000. So those are things that, you know, we have to pay. So I thought it was important for you to know that. I think the next page in the packet is probably...
Kim, before you go there, sorry,
Yep.
just for my edification here, does the, remind me I think at one point we'd heard some breakdown costs of, per pupil for student choice and school choice rather, and in and out of district costs. What are we talking about per student these days? What it costs to send somebody, excuse me?
To send them out of district? Well, if they choice out, I think it's what, $5,000.
$5,000 still, yeah.
For charter, you got that? Okay.
Yeah. Margaret Larson, member of Hampshire Regional School Committee and the Finance Subcommittee. So depending on the charter school, that can range between $16,000 and $21,000.
Not including transportation, or?
No, we don't deal
pay
with that. No, we don't.
Only for special ed.
Okay. 16 to 21,000 for the charter school, per student.
Per student.
But there is an offset to that from the state, right?
We do get some charter.
Okay.
Do we still?
We don't really get extraordinary relief for charter, but we do
Right.
get some charter reimbursement.
Right, so that, if you look at the next page in the packet, this is it's a combination of a few things here, but part of it is what the assessments are to the town. So if you go to at the top, our fiscal '24 budget is $17,075,643. One of the things that changed between our February meeting and our March meeting was that we got cherry sheet numbers, so we were able to do a little more solid figuring on these things. So you'll see there that you'll see what our cherry sheet said for Chapter 70, school choice, regional transportation, and charter reimbursement. And then the next section of this sheet, you can see how much of our excess and deficiency and school choice revolving, and then grants, what we expect to get back in special ed circuit breaker, tuition, that would be our Worthington, right? Worthington and Clark?
Yep,
Yeah.
Worthington and Clark.
Worthington and Clark, right.
And did that go down because of the numbers?
Say that again?
Did that go down because of the number of
Yes.
students?
And Kip, Becky's new on finance. Are you familiar with the excess and deficiency account and what makes up that balance? No. You want to just hit on
So,
that?
right, so every year, the state certifies money that we didn't spend, and the way it works is the regional schools, it's not just us, regional school districts are able to hold that money in their excess and deficiency fund. And so we use it for a variety of things. One of them is to bring down assessments to towns with our budget, and that's part of what we did here.
So, and can you also just you're only allowed to keep how much of the?
5%.
5% of the total budget.
5% of the total budget is what we can keep each year when they certify us.
So does this figure represent the 367.5? Does that leave in the excess and deficiency account 5% of the
Yeah.
budget?
Yes.
Yeah.
It leaves
Yes,
more.
Yes, it leaves a little more than 5. We're expecting to get an additional X amount because we got more revenue in for the last year. But after Kim's done, we'll also talk about some plans we have to create some stabilization accounts.
Okay.
Can I-
So, can I just ask one more question?
Can I-
On this,
Hang on, just Francine. Go ahead, finish your question, then we'll go to Francine. Yes.
I thought regional transportation went up at the state level.
Yeah, we were surprised by that, too. It's a strange thing. This is what they gave us.
I thought I read that it was going up.
So it's down by 2,700?
Down?
Yeah,
I know our cost.
I thought it was supposed to go up.
But it
Is that the
can't,
reimbursement?
yeah, it's the that's the reimbursement,
Yeah, that's the
right?
reimbursement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't you, Ed, don't you remember that when the numbers came in from the state, that regional transportation was supposed to be increased from last year?
Actually, for fiscal year '24, yes.
It was supposed to be, but that didn't happen for
That's
us.
not what you got, though.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. That would be
So,
worth looking into.
Francine?
go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, maybe you mentioned this and I missed it. In the school choice, is that Worthington money revenue?
No, Worthington pays tuition, so if you look on the additional revenue section.
They're down there.
Where it says tuition,
And that's purely,
it's not just Worthington, it's Worthington and we have some Clark school
others.
students as
Okay.
well.
But that
Okay.
difference, so it's down by 80,000
Yes, I
because of
see that.
lower enrollment
Yes.
from those kids, right?
Yeah.
From those
Yes,
towns. or
Clark has,
those sources.
Okay.
has 2 fewer students,
Uh-huh.
and then Worthington, I think there's a couple fewer.
Right.
okay.
Yep. And just for anybody who's listening at home, since we have the figures in front of us, just the offset by revenue is increasing by around 57,000 this year in terms of what's being told anyway for the Chapter 70 school choice, regional transport, and chapter reimbursement. So,
Right, and we also, I do want to say that for regional transportation reimbursements, it could end up being more. Last year, when we're looking at certifying our E&D for 21, 22, it came in higher than we'd anticipated. We just need to be very careful because they don't reimburse us 100%.
yeah, okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so then, so the net that's offset by revenue from is $6,890,041. So if you then take out, so then we're left with $10,185,602. Then the minimum contributions, which the minimum contributions for the state tells each town, you have to spend at least this much. And this is another thing that has changed since our February meeting. We didn't have these numbers then, now we do. So when you take what we all have to put in off of that $10,185,000, we are left with, okay, where am I? $4,890,361,000 that we have to fund. So when the state, for Southampton, the state said that the minimum contribution was going up by $30,710. So when you look at the box at the bottom that says total assessment total, for fiscal ~24, Southampton's assessment for Hampshire Regional is $5,602,791, which is a $125,343 increase, and the percent is a 2.29% increase over what we had from the town in fiscal '23.
And a couple of other towns are quite a bit more.
Right, and so to address that, again, a lot of that goes back to the minimum contributions. If you look at what happened, and this happens frequently, that different towns get hit with these changes different years. In this case, West Hampton's minimum contribution that the state is requiring them to put in went up by, $66,932, and Williamsburg's required contribution went up by $100,703. So sometimes, it's been our turn some years. It's been, it happens. I think it depends on reval.
It went up a lot in Chesterfield last time.
So that's where we are. That's what our request is.
Okay.
Yeah, so do you want to talk about the stabilization?
Also, I just wanted to say something about school choice, because we did use additional school choice revenues. So you can see for FY23, we did not use any revenue from school choice. We chose to in order to reduce assessments.
In the middle of this page.
In the middle of the page, okay. 517.5. So our current balance in that account is about 1.7 million right now. So we were reducing it by 500,000 to leave us 1.2-ish million. In general, we should be keeping in that account between 100 and 150% of our incoming school choice revenues every year, which is about 900,000 for us. So that's why we felt comfortable offsetting that. There were a number of questions at our meeting about, is this sustainable? Which is always the question, which is always why we've kind of not wanted to do that in previous years. But let's talk about circuit breaker for a minute. So we do get money, so we are estimating 400,000 for circuit breaker. Circuit breaker lags a year behind. So last year, our special ed expenses, were high, because they always are, but that got us X amount in circuit breaker, 400,000. Because of the extraordinary increase in special ed for this coming fiscal year, not only because we have students out of district, but because they increased the cost by 14%. That means that for FY25, we will be getting in much more in circuit breaker. And so estimating that is how we felt comfortable releasing some of our school choice funds.
Got it.
So the other thing that we are doing, so in excess and deficiency in our E&D fund, we would like to start annually contributing to 3 stabilization accounts, one for maintenance, one for capital, and one for SPED. So this has not been approved by our school committee yet. It will be proposed at our next meeting to seed those accounts with a certain amount of money that we can then start building on, because we are going to have some large capital expenses in the next 5 or 6 years, and we want to be prepared.
So you'd allocate a percentage for each of those 3 stabilization accounts or something?
Yes, so we looked at, for like SPED, we looked at if we got an additional out-of-district student, what would that cost?
Mm-hmm.
It's close to $100,000. So we wanted to make sure that we had that. For maintenance, we're like, okay, well, what do we have coming down the pike? So maybe that's $25,000. And then for the capital stabilization, we're looking at about $160,000. Again, this is just something that the Finance Committee is recommending. School committee still has to vote on that.
So that meets the requirements of that 5% excess and deficiency, as opposed to, quote, giving it back to the towns? You can instead use above the 5% to put into stabilization funds?
No, we cannot. No. So we are taking out of our 5% that we have, because our current balance is 5% right now.
So it was over 5%?
Yeah. So so every year, so the amount that gets returned, if there is any amount that gets returned, if that is over 5%, any remainder is delivered back to the towns, or the towns can say, you can keep that and use it for capital. We've never asked to have that happen.
But in theory, if it's 5% this year and you hold it, and it's 5% next year, you hold it, you actually then have 10% built up in that account.
Correct. Because we can keep, it's not so the revolving account can be over 5%. We're keeping ours at about 5%. So even with this moving money into stabilization accounts, we will still be at about 5%.
Okay.
So theoretically, you have the excess and deficiency account, which right now you said is about 1,500? How much is in that right now?
In our E&D account right now, it's about 1.3.
1.3 million.
1.1, about 1.1, yeah.
1.3?
It's 1.1.
But then we use
1 million.
1.1 million, and then in your...
After that. Yeah.
So in your excess and deficiency account, you have 1.1 million?
Yes.
And then in your choice...
We have about 1.2 left after the...
So you have $2.3 million that is undesignated right now?
Correct. And that's why we want to start some of these stabilization funds, and also why we didn't use more to lower assessments further, because we know we have multi-million-dollar bills coming up for a new roof, new field work. There's a bit. And so our hope is that we're not having to ask the towns to fund, $2 million. So let's see what we can do, but we still also know that we need to not reduce our E&D balance and our school choice balance to 0. That's not an option for us.
So just to be clear, the 3 stabilization funds, the money's coming out for those, that still leaves you the balance of 5%, or that is the 5%?
No, assuming, so we are assuming that we're going to get another 400,000 or so from last year's E&D, to catch up to that, and then that would keep us at about 5% with those particular dollar amounts being taken out that we're recommending.
Okay. Francine, questions?
No, okay.
It just seems like a lot to me. I just worry about Norris, to be honest with you. That's my worry.
But let's think about how, in the case of a regional, if we were to draw down our school choice or our E&D to, let's say, 1% or 2%, and we had our roof fall in, or we had 2 students come in for out of district, the only way that we could accommodate that would be to go back to all 5 towns and say we need more money. And so that's why through the state, we are actually permitted this amount and encouraged to keep a balance in there so that we can accommodate emergencies or situations we hadn't budgeted for.
Right. I know what you're saying, and I know that it's not easy. Every other department has to come to the town when something like this happens. So it just seems to me like our total budget for the biggest town in the entire district is, what, 19 million or something dollars, and you are sitting on 2.3 million, $2.3 million or $2.3 million. So
55% of that.
yeah, so to me, that just seems like an awful lot. When you look at the bigger scheme of the budget.
In preparation for what's coming down the pike for expenses, we feel that that is adequate. But we want to set the expectations with the towns that there will still be a capital request when we have to redo our roof. Because it's probably going to be close to 2 million for the roof.
Well, I think that
And another
most
500,000
departments
for
in
the
town
field.
could easily say that. We just heard from the fire chief about
Oh, I
all the incredible things that's needed there. So it seems like a lot of money, $2.3 million, to have, when you can go to the towns for capital.
If we had to go to the towns, let's say our roof caved in, and we had to put on a new roof, and it's $2.5 million, we're not going to draw down to zero, because that would be fiscally irresponsible for us. So we would have to go to the towns and say, we need $1 million from all of
Or
you
we need a
in
debt.
the space of 20 days, because we have to now pay a roofing company to repair the roof.
Or a debt service. I mean,
Well,
very
yeah,
few
I mean,
people-
that's-
very few people have $2 million.
Right,
to
no, I
give.
know that's a possibility too,
Right, yeah,
but,
it'd be finance, so.
we want to be fiscally responsible for what we know is coming down.
Well, and it's part, I don't sit on Hampshire Regional, but it's part of the process when creating these stabilization proposals. I'm assuming there's going to be some sort of policy,
Yes.
investment policy that comes along with it that may get, Southampton has 6 votes, 6 people on that committee, the total board.
Right.
They may limit, the law says they can keep 5% every year, up to, well, that's what they're doing, but if
Do you
folks
expect?
want to change that or reduce it, then you just got to talk to the
I have a question.
folks that set the policy.
Go ahead, Becky.
You have 2.3 million now. Historically, is that significantly higher? Is that about what has always been in there?
It's less because we're using more this year. We've never used school choice to balance the budget, and we're using a lot of it this year. So it's actually significantly less.
Historically, it's been more than that.
Correct.
So they're using 517.
I think that in terms of setting up those accounts, it would be very helpful for towns to see that progression of how much money has been in those two accounts, because I think that would be very helpful for people to see. It would be helpful, I know, for me to see.
Yeah.
Do you expect support from Williamsburg and Westhampton on the budget?
We don't know.
Okay, because that's a big increase for them.
Now we go back to my little corner of the world over there on Pomeroy Meadow Road. So when I printed this out, you're not going to have it, you will have a black and white copy because just the way it formatted. So the color version's up on the screen, and we can follow along here. But the top, so same philosophy as Hampshire Regional, it's just we're all on one page instead of 2 pages.
Okay.
So working left to right on the top section, you have the operating budget fiscal year '23, starting 7,000, then going all the way down for a total '23 budget of $5,040,000. And this is where I want to draw your attention to. If you just keep going down, you'll see when we did the '23 budget, we didn't show any offsets because it's all buried up on the top. That's why it's all zeros down there. We get to the bottom, it's 5.04. And that's what was on the town warrant that passed and voted. So now we go to '24 and we say, we want to break this all out and be as transparent as possible. And this really is a result of, in '22, having to go back and make those cuts, and it was convoluted for the school committee to figure out where it is. So one of the missions we gave Superintendent Sullivan, and it continued under Superintendent Bonneville, is that this has got to be broken out so anybody can see it, understand it, and in the event that we have to talk to the voters, it's transparent. So the '24 ask come down to $6.2 million. And yes, it is a $1.2 million increase year over year, but remember, the 23 numbers have all the, those are net numbers in there, gross net. Yeah. Those are numbers representing the offset. So the 24 numbers are pure expenses. And then we break out all the offsets for all the money that's coming in that is not from the general tax collections down the bottom. And that comes out to what, $869,000?
Yep. So
Can you repeat that figure again?
We have $869,000 in offsets,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, 869, 648,
Yeah.
so that's the.
Which
Yeah.
So you apply those offsets, and then the Norris budget is $5,391,000, or a 6.9% increase. There are no new positions in the Norris budget. Again, much like the other thing, it's the build in there. We are in the middle of all our negotiations. There are placeholders in here. Nothing's been signed yet. We did go through and look at 5 years of actual utility cost, electric, things that we were drastically under budgeted because we've been flatlined at $80,000 a year for the past 7 years in electricity. Considering the fact that we went 2 years running the HVAC 24/7,
Yeah.
that's not we were nowhere near that. We're overspending. So that gets you to 6.9, and then the next the bottom section there shows you what the cumulative impact when you look at education as a whole to the overall budget of the town, and that comes out to a 2% increase. But as Ed noted earlier, and I agree with him, the variable there is going to be that vocational tuition, which is sitting at $938 right now. And I think a 1% increase to the $12 million line is $132,000, which is somewhat within about 10 to 20,000, what Ed mentioned earlier. He thinks it might go up. So more than likely, it's going to end up at an overall 3% increase.
And will be vocational transportation?
More than likely.
Because it's per pupil? Per person?
Vocational transportation is one bus to Westfield and one bus to Smith. So as long as we don't go over, there's 72 students per bus. As long as we don't hit 75 and have to put a second bus on, the transportation for vocational education should stay the same, right?
Wasn't it just a van that
Well, it depends on the number.
owned
Yeah,
or
and I think the van goes to Westfield.
Right. And
But it's a bus that goes to Smith.
They're in a program that isn't offered at Smith. It's still confirmed that they're in airplane maintenance, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's a van that they purchased specifically to reduce the price of a bus.
Because there's less than 6 students. Yep.
Yeah, and so, again, the vocational tuition per student is roughly about what?
132, you said?
You've got 938,000, am I reading that? That's the total amount, right? Going down estimated to go down because you're estimating fewer students going out to voc.
Well, my understanding is on March 8th, that 938 represents those as of March 8th that signed up.
But
they have till April 1st.
And they have
Correct.
until April 1st.
Which is why it may go up. And just because they sign up doesn't mean they're actually going to go.
Right.
Right, so there is some flex there. But again, I've
Still,
been saying this right along, that's the line item that's going to change, more than likely.
right. That's a huge reduction.
My understanding, it was a big senior class that graduated.
What about Hampshire Regional Operating? Why is that such a huge difference?
The 5.6?
The 5602?
Well, that's the 2.29. That's if you go back to the page before that, the Hampshire Regional Assessment,
Yeah. Okay, you're right.
Yeah.
the 2.29, or 125,000 for us. Which, unless Bradley jumped ahead of me, we have a higher number for Hampshire Regional in our worksheet. So if he's already adjusted that, then the savings is already in there. But before I got up to the podium, it was a higher number.
Can't read it.
Yeah, so we've got,
Okay, thank you.
about 295, yeah. Okay. Becky, anything?
Now, just in full disclosure, if we look at the offsets, and I know you can't really read, hopefully you can read the ones that are printed.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
You'll see we have some in here. We have the 2 ARPA requests in there to finish the neurodiversity.
Right.
Those are some of the offsets. But our school choice is in here. So we're using $172,000 of school choice money. And before you ask the question, I don't know what that means our balance is going to be.
Oh.
I don't know the answer to that one.
That's what I was going to ask about the balance, okay.
We're using $95,000 of our preschool revolving account, which I think is $115,000. So that'll leave $10,000 in there, which potentially creates an issue because we use our van, the Norris van, to pick up the preschool students, but now the body's starting to rust. So we'll just kick that can for a little bit. And we also got the one-time extraordinary Chapter 70 money. We got $125,000 from the state because there was that one-year blip because of COVID. Our enrollment dropped and then it shot right back up, so they made us whole for that. And it came afterwards. The school committee decided, well, the logic to only use $25,000 was to save $100,000 in reserves so that in '25 we can fund year 3 of the neurodiversity program to give it that 3-year window. Our Rule 8 is at $45,000. We're using last year's actual number. This year's number coming, I think, is like 1,000 or 2 more ahead of that. So then we would use what we received this year will be in next year's budget. So we have fixed numbers. We are going to run into a problem, and we're going to be, the committees as a whole are going to be trying to put together a summer program of committee members to talk about. But if you look at, if you want to spend some interesting time, ask the town clerk for the birth rates for the past 10 years. And you'll see that Southampton's been a little busy during COVID. So we have a day of reckoning coming at Norris because we're sitting at, we can accommodate 488 pupils, and we're sitting at 470 right now. We have no additional classrooms at Norris. So we need to get creative because the quick answer is just build a new school, but that's not reality. So some of the things that we've started talking about with the Westhampton committee and the Southampton committee is there a way that we could merge our 2 elementary schools? Could it be the students from Southampton that abut the Westhampton line actually go there? Could it be that Westhampton, being the smaller school, becomes the pre-K through K school? There's some issues there because if you have a kindergarten that lives on the Easthampton line, do you really want them on a 12-minute ride up there? But luckily, I don't think this is going to happen for 3 or 4 years, but we're looking at it now. And when that, so each year between now and then, we're not going to have the flexibility or the ability to bring in school choice. So we're going to lose. Right now, we try to get 10 a year. So that's $50,000 that comes in.
It's granted, it's been a long time ago, but when my kids were at Norris, it was 500 and something students. So there's been a reallocation of space.
Yes, and also,
I'm not saying it's not warranted. I'm just
correct,
saying that we had historically higher numbers at Norris.
Correct. There is now a clause in the collective bargaining agreement that puts a cap on how many students can be in a classroom. We can get around that cap if we put 2 licensed teachers in the classroom. So it's 6, 1 or a half dozen the other cost-wise. But
can I ask a general question? This might not be for you, John, so much as it might be for the superintendent. Right now, we heard that the principal at the high school said that the addition of a mental health counselor for the middle school was a game changer in terms of, because we know there's a youth mental health crisis right now, especially with girls. So I'm just wondering, are there services in the budget or currently that address the needs of particularly the upper elementary school kids?
that is not for me. The microphone, for the folks at home.
There's many of them.
Yes, mental health has been a huge challenge to everybody. With this year's budget, we feel really comfortable with the level of services we can provide students as far as school adjustment counseling in every school. So we did not see any need to increase those services. Right, those needs are being met.
And
I just went to a presentation yesterday on the needs assessments that were done by all the local hospitals with the exception of Holyoke Medical Center, and they have identified the priority as youth mental health. So I don't know if that means funding could or would be available, but I just want to make sure because I feel like it's a huge problem.
And part of what we've helped out with, right, was the ARPA funds that's going towards some of that too. So that's
That's the
you know,
That's at the elementary
program.
level.
So I mean, that's basically aiming at that
Right.
issue.
Isn't that mostly the neurodiversity program,
Yeah.
though?
Right, at the elementary level.
Right.
At the
Your question specifically was middle school, which is up Hampshire Regional, right?
No, I was talking
Oh.
about the upper elementary kids, 4, 5, 6
Oh, okay.
particularly. But I didn't think the ARPA was funding a, wasn't it,
It's got special ed and a behavioral counselor and a,
okay, but it's specifically for a set population. It's not for
Yeah.
the general population.
And then lastly, looking forward and trying to think out of the box with the 32, 37 elected individuals that handle these schools, is attempting to have serious conversations about, do we stay the course we're doing now, or do we look to regionalize? And if not regionalize on the full scale, the example I gave of Westhampton and Southampton, do we start at the elementary level? You know, the fears that are out there is as soon as you regionalize, you're going to lose your school, right? So it's safe to say that's not going to happen in Southampton with 56% of the population. You know, but I could understand if I was in Williamsburg and, you know, I've gone from, I'm under, or Westhampton now that I'm in the low 90s for my enrollment numbers. You know, there's a day of reckoning coming, and you'll see, you know, their budget's going up. So do we talk about regionalization? And we're going to talk about it. Whether or not we actually get anywhere will be a different story. But there are a lot of pros, but there are some cons. And it's the intent, starting with the April meeting at the high school, to get every committee to commit to put at least 2 people on that, and that'll be our summer project to start working on.
You know, I was at a program a long time ago when they were discussing, you know, when the middle school grades shifted to be more like 5 through 8, there was or at least 6 through 8, there was going to be a plan to consider having 6th grade up at the middle school. And the entire audience was full of Williamsburg parents and children who all voiced opposition to that. So there's a lot of, you know, town identity in their elementary schools that will be difficult.
Yeah, so I would look to them to say, you know, kind of keep the grades the way they are right now, but pair Southampton and Westhampton together, pair Chesterfield, Goshen, and Williamsburg together, or New Hingham and Williamsburg together, and try to do the same thing. Something's got to change.
yeah. Okay, good.
Has the school requested, I know it's not due yet, but are there any capital requests that are coming in from the school?
I believe either 5 or 6 capital requests were submitted.
Okay.
And I thought it was about $50,000 worth for Norris.
Okay,
That sounds about right.
okay, well, we'll get it. I was just curious if there's anything huge.
When's capital meeting?
All right, thank you, everyone.
Okay, yeah, no, thanks, Chris.
Say one thing about
Yeah, go ahead, sure, please, yeah.
Something that you might find interesting, and I will be clear that I have very limited information about this, but the mental health, Hampshire Regional, you know, we have half-days today and tomorrow, and what Hampshire Regional staff is doing is they're in a 2-day program for mental health first aid.
Oh, that's
And so
good.
the staff will leave with a certificate, you know, they will have finished this program. So just thought, I know
Yeah,
that
that's
this is something that's
interesting.
important.
Who's heading that up, you know?
You know, remember when I said I was really thin on the
That's all right. I was
details?
just
No, I know
curious,
that it was Amy Scully and Lauren Holtz worked together, but it's a free, whatever it was, whoever this group is that's doing this for them, it was free. Do you know who it was, Deanna?
I know
But it was free PD and it was about mental health, so.
Well, that's good.
Good to know.
I participated in this a couple of years ago, and it's a fantastic program, and it's an all-day, there's the option to have an all-day training. So it's technically a grant-funded professional development, and this agency then pays, it's mostly UMass, well, many of the instructors that I know are from UMass, and then they're paid from the grant. So there's no cost associated to us as well. So the idea is to get everybody educated in the building. My goal would be to get everybody educated from paras to teachers about all the mental health issues, and they cover the gamut in their training.
Great, okay. All right, anybody have any other questions? I think this was a great presentation.
No, it's been very, very helpful.
Thanks, everybody. I mean,
Appreciate it.
well-organized and just really helpful just to understand the whole thought process here. So we really appreciate everybody's input, and thank you for coming. Much appreciated. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
safe trip, Deanna.
Yeah. And thanks, John, for helping organize all this, too. And,
Thank you very much, John.
The spreadsheet's really.
The package is
Yeah, the
great.
package is really helpful. Yeah, very good. Okay, anything from anybody on this? I think that's where we are for tonight. Any other business that can't wait until our next meeting, which is Tuesday, the 28th? I don't think there's anything. I'm not hearing anything. And so nothing else is on the docket. We'll meet again on the 28th and keep on going from there. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just looking at this calendar here. So is it our intent to try and have the warrant or done by the 18th? It doesn't look like we're meeting on the 18th right now.
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning.
Right, I mean, we've got.
Placeholder?
Yeah, we've got, actually, I think something, didn't we have a meeting on the 6th also, Ed? It's not on the, so April 6th should be on the agenda here, too.
So we
That's
have it on the
missing.
28th and the 30th, and then the 6th.
Yeah,
and
28th and 30th.
11th.
11th would be the regular select board meeting.
Right.
And then I have question 13, question 18, question 20.
Yeah, so 30th and the 6th are definitely on, and just for Becky, for your information, the 30th is going to be
General government.
General government. It's basically, it's what I call the town hall budget. Yeah, on the 30th?
I thought that was the 28th.
No,
30th.
30th, separate budget meeting.
Okay.
28th is,
I have
You already
it
posted
I
it.
have it on the
28th is
agenda
our
as
regular
28th
meeting.
is
Oh, really?
posted.
Oh,
so what are we doing on the 30th? Maybe
Maybe we
I'm
can
wrong.
finalize the budget.
that'd be nice.
No, it'd be nice if we can. But anyway, theoretically, the 30th, we're meeting. The 4th, we're not meeting because that's the town caucus, but we're meeting on the 6th as well, okay? And then the 11th is our regular one, but somewhere in there, we've got a lot of that's going to be budget-focused, at least.
So hopefully we can pull at the latest, pull the warrant together for the 11th. That's even ahead of
That would
what
be
Robert just said.
That would be nice. I mean, again, all the warrant articles are due in on the 6th. We'll see if, hopefully they all get in. If they don't get in time, then they don't get on. I mean, it's just that simple.
Do you feel that the Finance Committee needs additional information? I mean, we heard from Police and Highway, we heard from Library and Senior Center, and obviously tonight, the Fire and School, but, and then Government, I'm assuming is going to include Board of Health and Assessors in addition to General Government, or no?
Well, I thought there was going to be some
Separate meetings?
Separate, yeah, we were,
meetings, like on the 30th, that's where I thought it might be.
Oh, so you were thinking of covering your own on the,
Accountant,
yeah,
okay,
Yeah.
Board of Health,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
type of stuff.
Okay, so you're going to be prepared for your budget on the 28th, right? That's what you're saying.
That's what I thought I heard at
Yep.
the last meeting, but
Yep, no,
I
that's
may have
fine.
heard wrong.
No, I think so, that's fine, I think so. But so, we had, yeah, as Rini said, so we had Library and Council on Aging, just because they did their quarterly reports during our regular meeting, we took a moment to ask them budget issues and questions there. And then a week ago, we had the Police and Highway, but they're very extensive budget narratives that go with those, so even though people weren't here, I think you can take a look back at those
And they're on the tape.
be pretty clear, and yeah, it's obviously on
Have you gotten
YouTube.
their budgets, packets
I got one.
from Bradley?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so,
But you haven't met with any departments?
No, I think the only department that requested was the Board of Health, so that's
Okay.
something
okay,
Okay.
okay,
in the last day or two.
okay. So probably, so there may be, I mean, oftentimes what we've done, and correct me if I'm wrong, we've tried to do some joint meetings for the bigger departments, just because that seems to be more cost efficient and time efficient for everybody's sake. But then some of the smaller departments or committees that have budget requests, oftentimes those have gone to finance first, and then they may or may not
We'll grab
come,
the,
in front of
clicker
select
from
board.
under
So
the podium
however you
and
want to
shut
schedule
the,
those, I think that's
projector
fine to
off,
take the
please.
lead on some of those, I think.
And I know that I'm the liaison of the Board of Assessors, and they had asked at the last meeting if there was a date that they were expected to come and either report to the Finance Committee or the Select Board. And as of right now, there isn't. So if that's something, they are requesting, coverage of the office for the time the town hall's open, which is a change. So I don't know, she's just requesting, the chair is just requesting some notice just because her work schedule. So I don't know if you have a meeting planned, or when you do, if you want to just try to figure out who you haven't heard from, and if you want to have some, Yeah, okay.
Okay, great. Okay, I think
Bless you.
there's nothing else at the moment. All right, so with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned at
Thank you.
8:25.